Okay, I just hit send on the agenda, everyone. Freedom, would you remind me of your email address? It's not auto-populating.
My first or my middle and last name up.
Okay.
It's my email is BASTIONDIMAS@gmail.
Okay. Perfect. Everyone else should have an agenda in their inbox, and I'm going to get that out to you, Freedom, right now.
Dia, do you want to talk about the data working group?
Yeah, that'd be good.
Yes, absolutely. And Madam Chair, would you like to call roll first?
Yes.
Or have folks introduce themselves? That would be great.
I am happy to do that. Sharon, I saw you.
Yes.
Juliana, I have not seen you yet. I don't see Juliana. We know Freedom is here because he responded. And I don't see Bob yet. I saw Eli. And I saw David. I have not seen Jimmy Greer. Okay. Across. Okay, I'm going to ask you to correct me. Now, Zwada, please correct your pronunciation of your first name for me, please. I see him. I have not seen Bruce Maxwell. I see Tom, and I see Larry. So we've got the majority of us present. And Jennifer, you are here as well. Okay. And Sid is here keeping us all online. Dia?
Correct.
Great, thank you, Judge Blackburn and Ms. Roberson. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to your committee, and good evening to everyone. Thank you, members of the committee. I just wanted to share with you a couple of updates. First and foremost, as Judge Blackburn mentioned, she has sent out to you a memo that is dated from August 26th. Hopefully this is not the first time you're seeing it, but hopefully you've had a chance to look at it previously. It does step out a process that we've recommended in terms of assessing program impact as we receive administrative data from MNPD. And this process is loosely based on results-based accountability. And it specifically asks 3 questions, which is how much are we doing, how well are we doing it, and who is better off? These are going to be the questions that we will be asking in a newly formed data committee. It came to our attention last week that it would make most sense to host a data committee, primarily because each of the 3 committees of the commission are looking at some overlapping areas, and there is interconnectedness between those, among those areas. And so it would be easier if we could look at the data together, assess what we see is working, assess what we see is not working, and bring forth those data examples to all of our committees. So far, of the 3 committees, we have 2 appointees that have been sent to me. I'm waiting on the 3rd. But for the Communities Committee, it's David Esquivel, and so I look forward to working with David. And we also had, I just recently, right before this meeting started, the Workforce Committee sent me their recommendation, and their representative is Daryl Talbert. And then I hope to have the Policies Committee representative this evening. I will be sending out an email to those 3 individuals. We will be being joined by Dr. Peter Baylor from MNCO, as well as one of the data scientists from MNPD. This will be an opportunity to aggregate data requests. All commission members will continue to receive and have access to data. In order to streamline this process, we are working towards standing up a SharePoint site that will be provided to all commission members early next week with all data we've received so far, and any future data requests, so it's easily accessed. So that's where we stand with the data committee. I'd also like to update you on a couple of presentations. This Tuesday, September 15th, at noon, from noon till 1, we will be hosting a presentation on the pre-arrest diversion and psych triage unit known as the Crisis Treatment Center, which is hosted by Mental Health Cooperative. So that will be a presentation, and we will have on the line, this will be a video conference, and we will have on the line Deputy Chief Damian Huggins, who's been instrumental at MNPD in leading their end of this work, Amanda Brock from Mental Health Co-op, and Angie Thompson, who's the Division Director of Behavioral Health and Wellness from the Metro Public Health Department, to talk about the work that they have been leading over the last 6 years. On Tuesday, September 16th at noon, from noon till 1, we have a similar brown bag for the entire commission on specifically domestic violence and sexual assault and the work that is being done in partnership with MNPD.
Excuse me, dear. I believe you mean Wednesday is the domestic violence one.
Pardon me. Thank you for correcting me. Yes, that will be Wednesday, September 16th at noon. That's domestic violence and sexual assault. Ms. Sharon Roberson will be on that, as will Ms. Rachel Freeman. So 2 of our commission members can talk about the work there. We will be joined by other experts on that brown bag. These brown bag lunches with mental health on Tuesday at noon, and domestic violence and sexual assault Wednesday, the 16th at noon, will be recorded. They will also then be shared via the Metro YouTube site. So that will be publicly available as well after the recording is posted. Finally, I also just a housekeeping measure, a couple of housekeeping measures. We are at week 3 of the commission, and basically by week 6, it's going to be important for committees to be putting together their full universe of recommendations and prioritizing those recommendations. There will still be time to vet those recommendations in committee. Remember, the end game here is to have some very early wins that the next chief can set into motion. So in his or her first 12 to 18 months of tenure, okay? So that we will be looking at committee priorities and the sequencing of their implementation. You may also come up with recommendations that are outside of the purview of MNPD, and we would like to see those as well. And if they refer to other Metro departments. So just a reminder there. And then the other thing is, last week on this call, one of the members suggested updating the guidelines of the committee, and specifically to really remind all of us that we are big committees. We usually run 13 or 14 people, and that there should be equal time and equal representation for all committee members on opportunities to speak. And so we should all be mindful of that. So if everybody on this committee speaks for 30 seconds, just on one item, that would take 6 minutes. But if everybody speaks 2 minutes, that will take 30 minutes. And so we really encourage full debate. And because of that, the guidelines have also been updated to show that committee members are invited to work outside of committee meeting time, provided that they present their work or their recommendations in committee while it's being recorded. So I just wanted to be sure that everybody was aware of those updates in the committee guidelines. And I'm going to step back and see if anybody has any questions for me. Okay. Well,
sorry, I got one. I'm sorry.
Mhm.
Just a clarifying question related to work outside of committee guidelines. Is this something that we would want to make sure we work together with other members of the committee, work individually? Like, for example, I've already been in discussion with Ashford Hughes at MNPS related to SROs. I've talked to Dr. Valier on a couple of occasions. So I just want to make sure that I do it in a way that is informative and as a part of the group. So what are the kind of guidelines? Does that make sense, what I'm asking?
Yes, please, we would encourage that you coordinate directly with your chair and your vice chair.
Okay.
So that, I would imagine, I don't want to speak on behalf of any leadership here, but I would imagine it's in everybody's intention to ensure that the next few meetings are very focused and in line with the full committee's interests and priorities. Yes, please do that. And then it's just expected that any work that is done outside of a committee meeting would be reported on so that it can be recorded.
Thank you.
All righty, I'm going to turn the floor over to everyone. I'm going to have to drop off this call in about 20 minutes, but everybody should have my email, and I look forward to working with you. Thanks all.
Thank you. John?
Thank you very much, Judge Blackburn. Let me speak to a couple of matters, and we'll turn to one of this committee's most important charge, which is community policing. First, David, you had expressed a desire to review MMPD policy in its entirety. I wanted to give you an update on the best way to do that. So MMPD's policy manual is available online. However, it does not include all of the most recent training bulletins. And Sergeant Conza, correct me if I'm wrong about any terminology or facts. So these bulletins have the same force of policy as what's in the manual. So one of the questions that I posed to MMPD leadership was, what is the most efficient way to bundle this information in one place so that David and any other interested community member can see what current policy is in its entirety? They agreed there was need to do this. They've reached out to Metro ITS and are currently in the process of uploading training bulletins to a common website. So hoping that will be done shortly. They're literally waiting for Metro ITS to do that. And David, let's you and I follow up individually about that, and we'll just make sure that gets online quickly. If they don't have it done in the next day or two, we can get you those training bulletins as well so you can start reviewing. On that note, let's talk about community policing. So one of the most important charges for this group is to think about the future of community policing and what that might look like. And we all want to understand how that's playing out in Nashville right now and what a more, what community policing 2.0 might look like. So before we talk about where we are now, let's talk, that might be helpful to provide a bit of an overview about what community policing is and how our understanding of that has changed over time and what the options are. So a little background on community policing and where it came from. So In beginning in the 1960s, there were really very significant changes to the way that American policing took place, and police historians now talk about this as sort of the rise of the professional model of policing. And in a lot of ways, what that did was it centered on getting officers off the beat into patrol cars. We saw the birth of 911 and the rise of a system in which police officers spend time in patrol cars responding to radio calls. And the theory of logic for this approach was that bad guys would never know where police were. They would be deterred by these roaming police officers. Officers would respond quickly to incidents, etc. Fairly early on, people, after implementing this system, which is a system we still live with in many ways, most officers, patrol officers, spend their time responding to radio calls. Researchers began to ask the question of, well, does this work? And this was really sort of the beginning of criminology in a lot of ways. And one of the first assessments done in Kansas City really showed that random patrol actually did not deter crime. It didn't make people feel safer. And it led to sort of a rethinking of whether this professional model worked correctly and what alternatives might be. And it really sort of three alternative schools of thought sort of emerged beginning in the late 70s and the early 80s. So one was something known as problem-oriented policing, which I definitely want us to think about because I think it's very promising. Really associated with a criminologist named Herman Goldstein. And his argument was police need to partner with communities to problem solve. And crime is highly concentrated in places, in small groups of people, and it is quite circumstance dependent. The evidence that addressing crime in one place will displace it to other places is quite weak. So this problem-oriented school of policing was very influential. Another school of thought was sort of emerged around broken windows policing, the sign that visible signs of disorder created fear and concern and gave rise to crime. So we should address those schools of disorder. Doing that with beat cops was very popular and piloted in Newark. And the third and sort of dominant school that emerged was community policing. And this was an idea that was really developed in the early 80s with sort of DOJ support by a group of thinkers at the Kennedy School. And it became enormously influential. We currently live in a world in which virtually every big city police department says it's doing community policing. However, there's not a great deal of agreement on what it means to do community policing. And from the very beginning, there was a sort of fuzziness about the idea. You know, did community policing mean putting officers back on the beat and letting those beat officers problem solve? Well, how could rookie police officers do that? Was that reasonable? Was that not reasonable? And so community policing became one of these ideas that everyone said they were doing, but that what that meant from department to department really varied quite widely. So, you know, as experts have sort of focused on this question, one of the efforts has been to sort of narrow the focus. So what should community policing mean? Like, what are the elements of a successful community policing program? And there's general agreement that community policing is about a couple of things. So one is some level of community involvement and consultation. You know, second is there's got to be some decentralization. You've got to let people close to the problem figure out how to address the problems. And then the third part is problem solving. And so, you know, there's a general agreement that effective community policing is about that. And, you know, how that can work in different ways. So many police departments, including MMPD, have community coordinators. That's a sergeant in every precinct for MMPD. They do neighborhood meetings, they engage with residents, they have lots of contacts. That can be very effective. That's, you know, in many precincts, The COCOs, as we call them here, are beloved figures who can be effective problem solvers. Generally, when people think about sort of cutting edge community policing, they do want to do problem solving. They want to have patrol officers doing problem solving out in the community. And to do that, there's a sense that you need to get police officers off the radio so they have time to get to know neighborhoods and build relationships and do problem solving. So in a lot of ways, as police departments sort of think about how to breathe life into this concept, there has been a great deal of focus on how community policing sort of integrates with this idea of procedural justice, and how community policing can sort of be paired with problem solving in particular. And again, the idea is consult with communities and involve communities in problem solving. In many instances, there's an effort to involve other parts of city government as well, push responsibility for problem solving down to the patrol level, and those are sort of different. So one kind of interesting thing to think about is people love community policing, people love beat officers. When you sort of look at the evidence that supports community policing, the results are kind of interesting. First, it's hard to answer the question because community policing means so many different things. In some instances, it means patrol officers problem solving. In other cities, it can mean having community coordinators who go to neighborhood meetings. It can be quite different. But the sort of preponderance of evidence suggests that community policing, when done well, has a small impact on violent crime, and doesn't have much of an impact on property crime, and reduces fear of crime. As a result, most police departments are thinking in terms of how do we do more partnership-oriented crime prevention. Let's take that community involvement and let's empower and support officers to do problem solving in specific neighborhoods with the participation and indeed guidance of neighborhoods. And when you sort of look across the country and think about cities that are sort of pushing the envelope on partnership-oriented crime prevention, one city that comes to mind is Chicago. Philadelphia and New York have also done variations of this. And in Chicago, back in January 2019, the policing project and a sort of wide set of consultants went into the 25th precinct. And basically they said, what we're going to do is we're going to do sort of community policing plus. They created district coordination officers who are problem solvers for the precincts. They did some team building so that these coordination officers could problem solve not only with other officers, but with municipal government employees. And very importantly, they also designated neighborhood ambassadors to work with the police to identify priorities and to talk about, what public safety issues the neighborhoods wanted to try. This is something that Chicago has since rolled out to other areas. It's being piloted in New York and Philadelphia as well. And a fantastic and interesting thing about Nashville, and one of the reasons that I'm so glad that Sergeant Picanza is here, is that in many ways, we have been piloting a similar approach for longer than Chicago has, dating back to January 2008. That is when the policing project again came to Nashville and suggested that we try a neighborhood policing approach. And West Precinct became one of, I believe, 2 precincts to pilot this approach and has sustained it the longest. It's been something that Sergeant Picanza and his officers have been doing for 2+ years now. That work is extremely interesting, and it is also very relevant because since taking over as acting chief of police, one of Chief Drake's initiatives has been to direct the other precincts to redeploy their flex units or consider redeploying their flex units, which, it's my impression, had previously been used really primarily to address crime hotspots and had also often been moved from hotspot to hotspot to sort of do proactive policing, to redeploy as neighborhood engagement teams. That's exactly what happened in West Precinct. I'm looking forward to turning this over to Sergeant Picanzo and asking him to sort of talk about the history and those experiences. Before I do that, I do want to say that as someone who knows, you know, the sort of national literature well and a lot of players in this field nationally, you know, what West Precinct is doing and has been doing for some time really is quite on the cutting edge of what other departments are thinking about. And so as you consider whether you want to make recommendations that MNPD put community policing or neighborhood engagement at the center of its activities, you know, what's happening in West Precinct, how we could do that work better, what it might take for what it will take for other precincts to do this well, what are some of the difficulties of doing this, are all extremely relevant questions. And, you know, I think we're very fortunate as a city to have had a pilot going like this for so many years, and to be at a moment where we have a acting police chief who's expanding this. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to an actual expert. And I also want to recognize Ms. Fletcher from the West Nashville Dream Center. Thank you so much for being part of this. A question for both of you is Cheryl Cox, is Ms. Cox on this phone call? Has she been able to join you?
She's running a little bit late, but I do believe that she's still trying to get here. She had a kids basketball practice, so hopefully she'll be here in a minute and I'll fill her in.
Okay. And Ms. Cox is a resident in the 40th and Clifton area who's worked directly with Ms. Fletcher and Sergeant Picanzo. But with that, why don't I turn this over to you, and Sergeant Picanzo, can you do a better background than I did on this initiative?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to start with thank you for your kind words there, John. It means a lot, just because our team's worked really hard to get where we're at. So it's nice to know someone who's as knowledgeable about all the different policing strategies to acknowledge, you know, our successes we've had. And I want to start with this too. If I get long-winded, please stop me, because I'm very passionate about this style of policing. And I think you'll see why when you start seeing some of the successes we've had in our community over there at 40th and Clifton. So just to start off, you know, as John said, my name is Sergeant Jason Picanzo. I lead the West Precinct's community engagement team. And I want to thank you guys as a commission. You know, I've watched every commission meeting since its inception. And y'all have been tasked with a very difficult but important job. And I want to say, just to encourage y'all, I think y'all have done this very well. And that's shown in the fact that you've invited me, and in other subcommittees I've seen officers were invited in to give you guys knowledge. And so I think that shows a lot of wisdom in these subcommittees. And I encourage y'all to keep doing that, because, you know, there is a lot of wisdom that we can share and pass on to you guys. So y'all are definitely doing it right, and keep that up. So, so just a little background. Let's start with how we got started. I know John told you the Public Safety Partnership came to us. They're a branch of the Department of Justice, and they encouraged the department to try this different style of policing out. So historically, in Nashville, the way we would handle high violent crime areas would be to send in, which y'all have heard Chief Drake talk about lately, flex teams. We would send those flex teams into those communities when crime would seem to be a little higher than normal, and officers would go in, and it would be, let's make traffic stops and let's get Terry stops and people to jail. We got to clean it up. Crime would settle down. We would leave. The officers would leave the neighborhood. A few weeks would pass. The crime would start back up. We'd go back. Same strategy. And this would just be a revolving door for many years. but that's all we knew. That was the practice at that time, and that was how it was when I came on 10 years ago. And so in 2017, the DOJ came to the department and encouraged the department to try this program out. And West Precinct and another precinct volunteered to take on this project. And the other precinct, it had its own problems, so that they had some trouble getting off the ground. But at West, we were able to really make a lot of headway quickly, and a lot of that is our partnership with TJ Fletcher and the West Nashville Dream Center. They're on this call. We'll talk some more about that. But the way we approach this is we wanted to, the words we talk about a lot are collective efficacy. And in short, what that is everyone who is involved in a community is a part of making a change there, and all of us working together to make that neighborhood better. So that's the police working with the residents, and the police working with the businesses and the nonprofits and your faith-based organizations, and all of us having a good relationship and coming together to make the neighborhood better. So we knew we had to go in these neighborhoods, and instead of the old style of coming in and arresting people and making traffic stops, we had to build real meaningful relationships within that community. And we knew that was going to be hard because a lot of these high crime areas didn't have the best relationships with police. And so we had to build that trust. I was an SRO for a couple years. And when I was intrigued when I was hearing about this program getting started, and when I heard about what their goals were, I thought a lot about, man, it sounds a lot like being an SRO, because anyone could tell you that an excellent SRO is one who has a great relationship with their kids. They stopping them when they're walking down the hall, and they're talking about their day and their weekend, and the kids are coming into their office on their own, wanting to just let them know what's going on, and they have a really close relationship. And that SRO would know what's going on at that school way before it would ever happen. It would be so far ahead of the game and be able to stop it before, any type of fight or any type of drug use, whatever it would be. But that took an officer willing to get out and really engage with the kids. So I took that mindset to our team of we've got to have that same mindset where we just get out and we talk and we just get to know the residents just like I did the kids in our schools. And as crazy as this sounds, the way we started it, and it may seem shallow at first, but the way we did it was we started with coffee and donuts. And every week we would get coffee and donuts, and we would drive out to the neighborhood, and we'd sit in the alleyway where the residents would hang out. And we'd put the coffee and donuts on the patrol car and just stand out there. And we'd invite a few to come, break bread with us. And it was slightly cold reception at first, as expected. But one or two people may come, and then we just get to talk with them. Then we come back the next week, and those same one or two would come back, and then maybe 3 or 4 new people would come. And after consistently doing that weeks after weeks, next thing you know, we have 15, 20 people out there breaking bread with us. And we all know what happens when you're breaking bread. It leads to conversations. And we just got to talking, and it was weeks and weeks and weeks of talking. And that's, one thing, before I get too far ahead, John had mentioned is allowing officers the time to stay off of the beat, if you want to call it, just not answering calls. One of the key things we do is we have to give the officers time to do that, to actually sit and talk for hours at a time. That was what allowed us to do this and build these relationships. So anyways, as I go forward, so we started building relationships. Well, your conversations get a little deeper every time you talk to somebody. And we start to find needs that these community members had. And it maybe started something as simple as, I say simple, to us it's simple, but to them it was probably a very big deal. They're low on groceries. So what do? We got with the FOP program and got them some groceries that day. We set them up with some nonprofits to help them with their utility bills or to pay their rent. And what that did is when we consistently kept doing that, they trusted us a little bit more to maybe tell us a little bit more about themselves. And then one time we were talking to a gentleman we had been known for months now, and we had found out he was in his 70s and he'd been sleeping on a pile of blankets for over 5 years. That was his bed. And he had really bad back issues. And so the team worked with the FOP to get funding to buy this gentleman a bed. And the important thing is after that, we came right back and we kept talking and hanging out and we never left. And, you know, a lot of people will ask me, well, when did you know you made it? Well, we had been doing this for months, and that was all we were doing for months was just trying to build those relationships. And they got very close. The residents were getting really close with our officers. They got so close that at one point, one of them went out of town for the weekend, and they asked one of our officers to dog sit for them. And so that was how close they were. They really turned into more than just it's a friendship. It was a real friendship between the residents and the police. But this is how we knew we had made it on a police level. After months of doing this is in August. I believe it was in August. We had a shooting in the neighborhood, and the officers were just down the street, and the victim of the shooting had walked up to the officers. And so the officers were tending to the victim. So patrol, who doesn't have the time to do what we do because they're bouncing the call to call to call, they don't have the time to sit there and talk and get to know people as deep as we were. They show up to the scene and nobody wanted to talk to them. And it's in the shooting happened in the same alley where we always have our coffee and donuts. Well, nobody was going to talk to them or tell them anything. And one of the officers gets on the radio and he says, "Hey, we got the scene held over here, but nobody's telling us anything." Well, once the fire department got there to take care of the victim, I sent my guys over immediately because we knew the people who lived there. The minute we showed up, it was, this is who shot him, this is where the gun is, and this was what it was about. And it was only because they knew who we were. They knew exactly who we were and they trusted us. We had built this trust and this bond with these residents. And they knew while we were there that we weren't there for any underlying reason. Like we were there to truly give that community back to them. And then after that, once they saw like we were not leaving, we were here to help them and to work together collectively. Cheryl herself, Cheryl Cox, she said, "Hey, we're having issues at nighttime. Is there any way y'all could get here at nighttime?" Well, you better believe it. We're going to be there at nighttime. If you're going to tell us something specific, then we're going to do it. And this is how it's different is, as John had mentioned before, we would, if we're having trouble in an area, you would send a flex team to just flood the area, right? Well, with this was a community member giving a specific pinpointed issue of what we needed to address. So we changed our shift. We showed up where they said to be at an exact time. And sure enough, that was the problem that was there. And we were able to fix that problem for them. And that was us. There's that collective efficacy, us working together all built off that relationship we had together. Another good example of that is, it's kind of a newer one, but it's just a great example. We had met a new family in the neighborhood and we had a cold reception from them. They didn't really know us. They were new. And we just kept up talking to them every time we saw them. "Hey, how you doing?" You know, they might not have waved to us or interacted with us, but we weren't going to let them not, you know, because we were not going anywhere. We're as much a part of that community as anyone else. And we just kept it up. "How you doing? How you doing?" And finally we would get a wave or we would go, "Good," you know, and we would slowly build upon it. Well, then one day we were more intentional and went up to him and said, "Well, what do you need? What is there anything we can do for you? Welcome to the community. What can we do for you?" And they had a need that we were able to meet. And it wasn't but 2 days later, we had another incident. And the minute we show up, this gentleman's waving us down, giving us all the information about the incident that we needed. And so those are things that we were only able to be successful there because of relationships we're able to build. TJ at the Dream Center, her staff, they are so plugged into the community that they have their voice speaks for everyone there. They're so caring, and what they do, what we piggyback and team up with them constantly. Um, they meet so many needs that we find, and we get to help them when they have issues. If it wasn't for that bond, I don't know how successful other teams could be if they don't have partnerships like we do with the Dream Center. So, as far as that, as far as the partnerships, this is how it relates to statistics. So we started in 2017, or sorry, January 2018. As of today, I checked the stats today, and we have all the stats available to you if you need them. We've had a 46% reduction in crime in the area of 40th and Clifton. What that relates to is 69 less crime. I'm sorry, 77 less crimes today than this time in 2017 before we started. And what that means to us is not just crimes, but that means there's 77 less victims in our neighborhood. And that means 77 people feel safer over there. And I can give you statistics, and the statistics are great. But what you need to know is, and I hope you hear when Cheryl speaks, is yeah, on paper, crime says it's good, but what matters is that they feel safe now. That neighborhood, people may think it's a bad neighborhood. And if y'all get a chance to watch our videos that I know Judge Blackburn sent out to you, I really hope you do. And, one of the things I say, and I say a lot because it's really true. People may think a neighborhood's bad, but there's not bad people in the neighborhood. There's absolutely great people in the neighborhood that we have to take the time to get to know and build relationships with and work with them. And there's no way, when I talk about the crime numbers, Jason Picanzo and his West Precinct Community Engagement team, they're not the reason for those crime numbers. It's the residents like Cheryl Cox and Flea and Frisdale, those people that we work with, they're the reason that we're able to say crime's down 46%. That's the partnership with them. It's not a sergeant and 6 officers. It's a sergeant, 6 officers, the Dream Center, and an entire group of residents that have helped that neighborhood be a successful, safe neighborhood. It's really cool to know that they feel safe. They say in their video of, I can have my family over now, whereas I could never do that. One of the ladies, she told us a very personal story of, I had a granddaughter and she was 5 years old and I was never able to let her come to my home. And in 2019 was the first time she was able to invite her over and have her granddaughter spend the night with her. She felt safe enough to do that. And so the fact that they feel safe is way more powerful than any number I can give you here. I could say so much. I hope I've given you enough to y'all can ask some questions. I could keep talking forever because I'm passionate about this. I do want you to know that here at West Precinct, we have a command. This would not be possible without a commander who is equally as passionate about this type of work. David Corman and TJ, I think, can attest to that. And I know John also hit on this. Chief Drake has also championed this and said, look, we've seen what is going on at West. East Precinct has also been very successful. And he said, look, we're going to take this department wide now. We want to be successful. I think there's a lot of work to do department wide so that we're all on the same page, but it's definitely possible. So I'm going to stop there. I could keep going, but I want to obviously give you guys time to ask me any questions you may have.
Thank you for that overview, Sergeant Picanzo. I might ask just a few questions to bring out other aspects of this, and then I'll get out of everyone's way. Can you talk a little bit about some of the problem solving that you've done with neighborhood residents? That'd be sort of one question, and talk about, where Metro has been a good partner and where maybe we could improve ourselves. And then, Ms. Fletcher, I'd love to get your perspective on, on what's different about this approach to policing than what you saw before as well.
Yeah, so I'll address the problem solving. I know I mentioned one when we had first gotten started. We were made aware of things going on at nighttime in the alleyway where a lot of the residents live. And, she gave us, you know, very specifics. The multiple neighbors there gave us multiple specifics of what to look for. And so instead of us casting this wide net one night, you know, trying to catch whatever we could that didn't belong there, we were able to pinpoint what we needed to do. Recently, we've been able to expand to a neighboring neighborhood to the 40th and Clifton area, and there's been a lot of narcotics issues. And you know, we can successfully say within a matter of 2 weeks, we've been almost able to get rid of any upcoming narcotic issues. And that's only because here's the thing: residents live in their areas, in their homes, 24/7. We work 8 hours a day, 5 days a week in that neighborhood. They're going to know so much more about what's going on in their neighborhood than we ever will, more than any intel we ever could get. They know so much more. And so they give us so much information of issues they're dealing with. And that when we are able to go in there and help solve those, that's that problem solving partnership. We take their problems that they're having that are crime related, but let me stop there. They're not even crime related. We've helped them with lights that are out to make them feel safer in their alleyway. We'll get on the horn with NES. Hey, can we please get these lights fixed so that they can feel a little safer in their alley? That's part of the broken windows concept. We work really close with landlords, you know, to help them, you know, get trash picked up in the area. So you have to use your neighbors. If you weren't using your neighborhood, you're just kind of cast a wide net, because they can give you specific, pinpointed information that you need to successfully fight crime in a neighborhood. That's why they're a part of that 46% reduction in crime. That's not just the police. We went solely off of the intel that we were able to get from the businesses and the residents and the landlords and the nonprofits. You know, I'll say the challenging part, and I want to be careful what I say, but one of our biggest challenges has been the government. You know, if I knew who worked at NES, I could get them on the phone. They're there right away. If I'm having issues with needing to have the weeds, you know, chopped down in the alleyway, we can get Public Works on the phone like that. But when there's bigger issues, and just one simple issue would be trash. You know, we've been there for almost 3 years now, and I have still not been able to solve a trash issue there. And that neighborhood, there's, just give you an idea, they're 23 trash cans short in this one little neighborhood. And so what happens is when the residents go to throw their trash away, they put it in the cans, but there's not enough cans. So the wind will blow, it piles over, the wind will blow, and the trash goes everywhere. So I finally was able to get a hold of somebody, and I'm not blaming anybody, but they wanted these residents in a low income area. Well, they're going to have to buy a new trash can. Well, they obviously can't afford. They're already living in a low income area. Why are we going to make them foot the bill for something that we as a government could probably easily fix for them and help their quality of life and not have trash swirling around their area? When we're telling you, look, they're doing what they're supposed to do at getting it there, but the trash gets picked up once a week, which is understandable. It's a big city. Why can't we just bring more trash cans to help them? But that's something we're still working on. But those are the type of partnerships. It's more than just policing. We work on quality of life things, but that's also what helps build those relationships. Is they know that we're not just the police. We're a part of that neighborhood as much as they are, and I think they would attest to that also. And know that, give you an idea. One of my officers left recently, and everyone in that neighborhood has called and reached out to him, just checking in on him. He's not even the police anymore, because that's how the type of relationships we've built is just a really close bond, that even though he doesn't work here anymore, they're still calling and checking on him, wondering how he's doing, wondering when they're going to see him again. So I hope in the future that as this grows, I hope we get to talk about that today, of how this will grow, that our relationship and working relationship with Metro government itself we could just work on it. I'm saying it's bad, but maybe other entities we can work a little better to help serve all communities in Nashville. One more little thing with that is, the alley it's a very old neighborhood, and there's really bad alleyway, potholes all in the alley, and The residents even used plywood to cover up the potholes. They're so bad. And I've been working for 2 years now to get this alley paved, and I can't get it paved. And I've called everybody that I can think of and told everybody I can think of. And so it's frustrating for us to know, like, how the police, and this, I don't want this to sound bad, but the police department is investing its time of providing and serving this neighborhood. Just imagine what all of our neighborhoods could be like if everyone equally got involved in every neighborhood, how successful Nashville could be as a whole. So I do hope that we get to work on that in the future, because it'll definitely help the success of these neighborhoods. Now I'll leave it to TJ now.
Hi, can everyone hear me okay? We've got a temporary school happening a little bit behind me. We've still got some kids here. Um, I guess probably what I really need to address is how we have connected with community policing, and as a community partner. We've been in this neighborhood for 8 years, and really what it means to us and why we're in support of it. So kind of back up. 8 years ago when we first started here, there was a lot of violent crime in the community. There was a lot of drugs and guns, and there was a lot of activity, especially amongst middle school kids being recruited to sell drugs. And so that was one big, huge issue. Safety for the kids that were playing outside was a huge issue. When there was, we would hear gunfire pretty frequently. And then our mission is to protect and empower people living in distress. And the hardest part from our perspective, for the families that we work with, is not so much the violent crime. It's the small things that people are living in distress over. So they're living in distress and they're constantly getting behind on different things. And so, a family that we know really well, the dad has a felony. He was in prison for 10 years. And every time he tries to get a job, he doesn't get it. And he knows how to do one thing that he's learned how to do since he was 10 years old. He knows how to sell drugs to feed his family. And so when we look at the crime and we look at what's happening, what we see are people that have been oppressed for generations by a system that was created to keep them down. And then when we look at the crime that's happening around them, we slowly recognized in the beginning that a lot of the things that were happening were not actually their real lives, or what was important to them as a resident of this community. And the part that was really scary and hard about that is that as an organization that committed to protecting and empower people living in distress in a primarily African American neighborhood, we realized really quickly that if we were going to build shared relational equity with people in the neighborhood, every time we heard a gunshot or every time we heard something going on, we couldn't just call the police. And that was really frustrating for us in the very beginning. And even as of 8 years ago, we started reaching out to different departments and different entities and tried really hard to work with officers in the neighborhood to create some type of relationship with them where we felt like we could build some type of trust. And there were some moments where it happened, and there were some moments where we just didn't feel like we had it. And there was a couple of times where we felt like we had betrayed a community member's trust because we made a decision to file a report or whatnot. And what ended up happening is that for a period of time, our staff and volunteers essentially we were essentially community policing. We were checking on people. We were going door to door and making sure people were okay. We were taking kids back to the center if we knew that there weren't parents home. We were making sure that we knew what was going on in the neighborhood to keep people safe. And then, so for us, when community policing came in, it took a little bit, but what we realized was that if what they said was real and they were going to do what they said they were going to do, it was a win for everybody. And it took time, but over time, I think we developed a deep level of trust between the community engagement team and the Dream Center and our families. And that trust that the families had with us slowly begin to transfer over, and the same the other way. And, you know, for everything that Jason said in terms of how people in this neighborhood view this particular version of policing, I'll tell you that the officer that he's talking about that recently left, I've had multiple people ask me, where has he been? Why hasn't he been by to visit? When's he coming back? Can he come visit us? And often we'll find something out that happened, and we'll say, have you figured everything out? Is everything okay? And they'll say, yeah, we already called Wilson or Piconzo and everything's fine. And so there is something, not to sound trite or like a Disney movie, but there is something very magical about what's happening over here. There are people that have decided that, okay, there are groups of people here. There's the Dream Center, there's the Community Policing Department. They truly want us to have a better life, and they truly understand that we don't necessarily live in this situation because this is what we wanted. And so when that trust level starts to build and it starts to create this relational equity that kind of goes all the way around. And so now we're all collectively involved, whether it's with schools or mental health or DCS. If somebody is in distress, everybody gets involved. And I know that if I call the community engagement team, I know that they're going to work with me on the issue. They're not going to just run over, guns blazing, trying to, solve a crime. They're going to help us figure out, like, how do we help this family? And there are times when, these officers are building bunk beds for kids or playing basketball in the basketball. I can't even think, what do they play basketball on? Not a field, court. There we go. They're playing basketball with the kids on the court that they built for them. And I think the thing, you'd said earlier on, like, what can we do better? And I think the thing that is so frustrating to me is I hear everywhere people are calling for police reform, and they're calling for things to change, and they're calling to defund the police and all of these things. But there actually is a better way to do it. And it is so frustrating to me that that is not happening everywhere. And I will tell you that the North Nashville precinct has reached out, and they've recently reenacted their community engagement team and have asked us to partner with them in North as well. And we're really excited to do that. But we have to start way back at the very beginning. We need to make sure that the officers that are part of that team are going to treat those relationship and that equity that we have in the community with great tenderness and care. And we think about that every time. We think about that. If in this situation, if we call the police, what's going to happen to our community member? And we've been on the bad side of it not going well. And so when this idea came to us, it took a bit, but we immediately knew that this could be the solution to start to change things. And I will tell you, from 8 years ago till now, the level of safety that people feel in the neighborhood is so different. Kids do not run when they see police cars. They run towards the police cars because they know it's probably someone that they know. The families in the neighborhood are no longer fearful of being police officers or associated at some type of an event. And I do think that there is a huge value in partnering with, not only with us, but we do that on the other side. We partner with schools, we partner with mental health, we partner with anybody that has any connection to anyone in this community. Because if something is going wrong for some member in the family, and there's some way that we can help, there are so many different entities that are now involved in making sure that it's not just the streets that are safe, but they're safe inside their homes as well. And so I know that it's not like this everywhere, and I know that there are huge, huge issues out there. But I will say that my experience with community policing is that we talk a lot more about who can't pay their light bills and who needs a new car and who needs groceries and who needs help with paying off a bill or getting their license reinstated, or who had an issue with a police officer in a different department and can we help. We talk a lot more about that than we do about any violent crime. And we all feel it very, very deeply when there is violent crime, because we know that the work that everybody has been doing we know that work is going somewhere and it's going somewhere well, but it's very saddening when we hear about an incident that's a violent crime. But 8 years ago, it was every day. And so it's just changed dramatically. And I think that if the police department is trying to honestly and seriously address a system that is completely broken, especially for people of color, if that is truly the goal, I don't know what the entire solution is. That is not my wheelhouse. But I will say that this is working. But it's also, I think, it's really comes down to the right people in place. And I know that Jason has been very particular about his team and who he chooses to be on his team. And I think that that's something that really needs to be considered. If this becomes a model that replaces the old style of policing, I'll say it because he probably can't, but it might also need to replace a lot of old style police that don't believe in this method. So any questions on that? I talked for over my 30 seconds, sorry.
Hi, it's Jennifer Gamble, and thank you for joining us today and tell us about this wonderful program. I do have a question. You mentioned that you had to readjust your thinking in your staff and organization as far as if an incident happened, like a shooting, not just calling the police. What did you do in place of not just calling the police? And also, was there a neighborhood organization or a group of neighbors? You mentioned Miss Cox. Was there a group of neighbors that you relied on? And that may be a question for Sergeant Bacanza, that you relied on to talk to in addition to the DREAM organization? So those two questions.
I can answer that one first and then flip to you, Jason. We are very old school in our communication with people. So we literally go to people's doors and check on them, find out what they need, find out if they're okay, find out if their families are okay, and let them know that if there's anything that they need that we can support and help them with. And we did that in the beginning, and most of the time people looked at us like we had two heads. But eventually they started calling and saying, actually, yeah, my kid needs support with after school care, or I lost my job and I can't deal with this now. And over time, and we have a very different model than we did 8 years ago, but over time that relationship equity grows and they start reaching back out to us. And so whenever there was something that would happen, and still to this day, we can pinpoint where something is happening, and we have, anybody at any point in the neighborhood we can find and say, like, what's going on? Do you need help? Did you hear that? Has someone called the police? Is there any way that we can get involved? And way back in the beginning, if we did call the police, we would actually go to wherever the incident was and stay with our community members to make sure that they were fairly represented. It was not necessarily, wasn't necessarily the favorite method to everybody, in terms of our security team and all of that. But what we found was that that relation. So if something were to happen, I'm thinking of a particular incident. A child two children came to our facility in, dirt on their clothes, saggy diapers, and they're about 2 and maybe 3.5. And they kept saying, help. And so we didn't know what was going on. We said, well, where do you live? And they couldn't really talk very well. So we started following them back. And I texted a staff member just discreetly and said, can you call the police and tell them this, and tell them that I will meet them at the house. And so then when we get there, I text her the address, and the kids say, this is where we live. And I knock on the door, and the screen door is open. I open it up, and I see teenagers, 5 or 6 teenagers with guns and bags. And I pretended I didn't see anything. I knew that the police were coming already. And these kids looked scared. I mean, they were just teenagers. And I just said, hey, are these your siblings? Because they were over at the Dream Center. And they said, oh, they must have woke up from their nap. And I said, well, I'm just, I'm a little bit concerned because what I saw inside the house. And I said, and I don't really actually care about that. I just care about these kids right now. And I said, and I need you to know that it's really important that these kids are safe in the next few minutes and that you guys are safe in the next few minutes. And I need you to know that my coworker has called the police and that they're probably coming, but I'm going to stay. If I can trust you, I'm going to stay and talk to them with you. Is that okay? And they said, okay. And the police came and DCS came, and it ended up being, and maybe it would have been resolved calmly. I don't know. I can't say that it wouldn't have, but I had enough experience to know that if I walked away from these kids, and when I say kids, I don't just mean the little ones, like these teenage boys, they were so young. They were not much older than my kids. And so what they were going through and experiencing, and to look in there and see fear on their face when they saw me, and knowing that some adults left 2 small children with teenage boys with guns. Okay. So in that moment, I felt that the greater risk was leaving them and walking away. And so I stayed, the officers came. Then I talked to them a little bit. They asked me to take the kids back to the Dream Center. I got their badge numbers and different things and just made them very aware. And I ended up getting some really great officers that followed up with us after. They helped us with the kids. They bought pizza for the kids and all that kind of stuff. And that was a situation that went well. But there were plenty of situations back in the beginning where we did not feel safe to leave family members alone with somebody that we didn't know. And so now, if something like that happens, and it happens way less now, we hardly see anything like that anymore. But if it does happen, we have 6 officers on speed dial that we can call, and we have full confidence that they are going to go and they're going to protect, and they are going to carefully figure out what's going on and figure out the backstory of the situation. So,
Thank you.
Yes, I have a question. Jay, said couldn't find employment because he's had a felony. Did you try to reach out to any formerly incarcerated mentors, or are you familiar with Gideon's Army? Also, because we provide mentorship for formerly incarcerated people who get out, and we try to put them on some type of footing to find employment, as well as we relate our stories to them to let them know that you can do something outside of selling drugs. So, yeah. Are you familiar with Gideon's Army?
Yes, I am, and I actually did. He's been in relationship with us for about 4 or 5 years, and his family a little bit longer. He actually has a good job now, and he's doing great. He actually chose at the time to be a stay-at-home dad, so that his wife could work. But he's very familiar with Gideon's Army as well. As am I.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
And to the officer that spoke, I see that most of the time we dealing with children and we dealing with elderly, but however, the ones who out there selling drugs or the ones who out there with guns, do we have any type of communication with them or a conversation with them without the handcuffs on them? Extreme poverty all around them. I'm pretty sure that because I commend you all for your efforts and everything you're doing, because that's very necessary. However, I think that, if we just running them away or we just incarcerating them, then it's really not helping them, because eventually they're going to come back to the same place. And if we're not preparing them or we're not giving them some type of opportunity to where they don't have to sell drugs or they don't have to pick up that pistol, then I'm pretty sure, this program would be a lot more successful. Yes, because just incarcerating people and things of that nature, we see what that has gotten us, because those same children that you're talking to, those are their parents that's out there. So I think, the main thing is keeping the family together, finding a way to how can we keep the family together, as opposed to just throwing them away or locking them up. I know, people, if you commit a crime, of course, you got to do the time, but at the same time, there should be something in there to where people can have an opportunity to redeem themselves when they are incarcerated. because in most cases, there's no rehabilitation going on in prison. It's just you in there, you sit there until your number called to go home. So, the whole infrastructure just needs some partnership, and we can't leave our organizations like Gideon's Army that's got boots on the ground, but nobody even talking about it on this call or norms period with the police. It's like they look at us like we are some type of toxic energy out here, but we out here trying to make their jobs way much better. So how can how can we have some type of partnership with y'all to whereas we can better these communities that you are already in there doing a great job. Like I said, I commend y'all for that. And before I leave, I got one more question. Was Andrew Delkey part of the West Precinct? Oh,
I'm just gonna. Jason logged off. Jason, are you back?
Was Andrew Delkey part of the West?
He's off. The sergeant's off now.
Oh, okay.
He's trying to log back in.
Yes, I see.
And I would just, I can't speak on his behalf, obviously, but I will tell you that I have seen this particular team. I'm not talking about all police, but this particular team, I have seen them de-escalate more situations than I've ever seen before. We very rarely ever see, 3-4 cars pulling up and coming out guns blazing. It's usually 1 or 2 people, and they start talking to their neighbors and finding out what's going on. And I do think, and especially in North Nashville, I do think that the community engagement team would be very interested in talking with Gideon's Army. I'm not with y'all, obviously, so I don't know what the history is there, but there are people at Gideon's Army that know me and know how to get in touch with me. And if that's something that they would like to participate in a conversation with, to at least see how we can be better at partnering, that is the same thing that the West Nashville precinct is doing with us. Now, obviously, we have a very different mission than Gideon's Army. I'm familiar with what y'all do, and I think that there definitely needs to be some type of conversation that happens, and that's how it happened with us. And like I said in the beginning, we were very skeptical in the beginning too, because we had real relationships with real people with real issues and real truth. They knew that there's a policing system that is essentially created to keep them down and to keep them systemically oppressed. And so our relationship with the police, this did not happen overnight. This took a long time, and it took a lot of trust on our part to be able to start to share those relationships. And I will tell you that it's not a perfect system, nothing is, but they have taken great care of those relationships and will often let us know, the outcome of something that happens. So I would say my opinion would be that if Gideon's Army wanted to work with, and I know you're primarily in North Nashville, but if you wanted to, they do have a new community engagement team there, and I would bet that they'd be willing to work with you, and I'd be more than happy to make those connections happen. So I think Jason's back now. I answered all your policing questions, Jason. Sorry.
Jason, did you hear Larry's questions? Or did you drop off when he was asking them?
I dropped off. I caught a little bit, I think, about de-escalation and then Gideon's Army working with North Nashville. Am I correct?
Larry, you're on mute.
Question for you, Jason, was Andrew Delkey part of the West Precinct?
No, Andrew Ducky was a part of our juvenile crimes task force. So no, he wasn't a part of West Precinct or a part of our community engagement team.
All right, thank you.
This is Bob Fisher. One of the things that comes to my mind as I hear us talk about the Dream Center, Gideon's Army, as we think about other organizations like the Next Door and just a whole host of organizations, those that are trying to provide mental health services, volunteer agencies. There needs to be a way for us to align those folks and bring them together to define their roles and define how they can work together for the good of the community. Because every one of them has something good to offer. And I know many years ago, I was a part of the founding of Alignment Nashville, which was designed to bring together all the nonprofits who cared about public education in Davidson County in Metro Nashville, and to get them to work together rather than competing with one another, and for them to see how they could leverage one another's resources. And I won't say it's easy work, it's not, but I think the power of bringing all those organizations together could be something that community policing could play the coordinating role in.
Bob, I would interrupt you there. I'm sorry, but that right there is the definition of collective efficacy. And
Yeah.
it's exactly the glue that holds everything we do together. I'm not saying that we're the glue, but I like to think that sometimes we are the in-between. And if we're not, maybe the Dream Center is the in-between. So yeah, that's the exact goal of what we're doing, but at a larger scale that we'd love to see.
But do you all then, when you see a situation that's not necessarily a policing situation, do you have a list of resources? Can you call this church, or can you call this community organization, and say, hey, we've got someone? Because actually the truth is too, all these nonprofits, and I know, the things that we do at our school in service, we're looking for customers. Those are our customers, people who our students get a chance to serve and to learn how to serve. So do you play that role now?
Yeah, we have a group a core group that we usually reach out to depending on what the need is. We'd love to fix every issue, right? But most issues require, funding. And that's something police departments, I don't have a credit card that I can just go swipe to fix a lot of issues for people. And so I rely heavily on the Dream Center. I rely heavily on multiple churches, both in the neighborhood and outside the neighborhood, in North Nashville and West Nashville. So yeah, there's no way we would be successful without those type of partnerships. And I'm always trying to find new ones that want to help out. I'm thankful to have, really, I'm going to call this a platform today, because when people hear what we do, the most common thing I get is, why have I not heard about this? And I wish more people did, because I feel like more people would want to get involved to help communities like ours. And you could find more people to help. We get a lot of help from it's called the FOP CPR, called Caring Police Respond Program. And so we get a lot of help from them as well.
I just want to jump in here real quick. I wanted to say first to Mr. Fisher, I really appreciate it, Bob, how you're thinking through those issues. When I emailed back and forth with Dr. Valier with the Community Oversight Board, he referred to those as upstream issues versus downstream issues. And kind of some of the things that have happened has been a lot of things have fallen downstream on the police that maybe we could deal with on an upstream level. That unification, like Alignment Nashville that you were talking about for education, so that unification upstream gets to some of the mental health issues before it gets triaged to 911. And there are other models that he was even referring to. I have it in an email in other cities where they've triaged the calls differently out of 911 to make sure that the upstream goes to the right place. So I really appreciate us thinking in that larger way. I also have two questions for Officer Sergeant Picanzo. One's a statement. Thank you so much for your email that says, please listen to the residents first, because they're the ones that are most impacted. I really appreciate your heart for that. So here are the two questions. One, why, in your opinion, did the other community engagement model fail? Because I know there was mention of two. And the second is, Ms. Fletcher, TJ Fletcher, brought up how you tend to be a little bit more stringent about who you're letting on your team. And I know this is not a question for our group or community, but there is a workforce group that is dealing with hiring and promoting and supporting. And obviously it sounds like from her perspective, you're doing something different in terms of how you're looking and how you're thinking about a police officer. So if you could address that, I would really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm actually glad I got these two questions. So I don't want to say that other community engagement team failed. They put their best foot forward. This is a new thing, especially for our department. We were just blessed enough to maybe head in the right direction, and being, who knows what it was that helped us be. Oh, I know it was a lot of the just work with the community. So I don't know how well they may have been received by their community or what. But that precinct that also did that has a very high call volume, and they rely, again, here I am referring back to you again, John, you're the rock star today. They rely on flex teams to help with calls for service, especially when maybe they're short staffed. And and I'll just say it, every precinct is extremely short staffed, and so we have to allow these engagement officers time to be in the community. If they are being pulled from the community to go to call to call to call, they don't have the time to sit there and talk and hang out with the kids. And that is a core value of what community engagement is being able to go to the Dream Center and draw pictures with the kids or help them with the homework. They can't be popping the call to call to call. And the precincts that have an extremely high call volume, they rely on those engagement officers. Hey, pull that engagement officer to help with that. And it's really no fault of their own. If they didn't, that's where you get your calls for service pending for hours on end. And you have to think if you or your daughter, your wife, or a loved one was on the side of the interstate and gotten their first wreck they'd ever been on, but then you knew there were officers playing basketball. You got to think how that looks. And so the command staff weighs, you have to put a cost benefit analysis, and they may have chosen, well, we got to use those officers for those calls for service because we were needed right there. The reason we were able to do it was I have a commander here at West Precinct that said, you are not pulling my officers in community engagement anywhere. You have to allow them. He understood that, and he made that sacrifice, and it was a sacrifice. West Precinct is the second largest precinct in all of Nashville. And sometimes you have 4 or 5 officers answering calls for service. And to give you an idea that think of if an officer was on a call at 4:40 and then another call came in at the Cheatham County line. That's 20 minutes, 25 minutes. And you need to send 2 officers because of an officer safety issue. What if that officer was by himself? So, Commander Corman, he made that sacrifice. He looked at that cost benefit analysis and said, you know what, I'm still going to invest my officers because our relationship with the community is so important. And it has paid out. I mean, we've seen the dividends of that investment, obviously. So, that's the reason I think the other precinct had to stop, is they were short on manpower. So, as far as who I picked, diversity is obviously an extremely important issue. I saw on the other subcommittee, the workforce, the other day, that 75% of the officers on the police department are male whites. I want my team to be diverse. TJ knows. I tell her all the time, I want a female. I want to be a very diverse, and luckily I am very diverse. But I want to be clear about one thing, is the color of your skin or your gender does not determine how good of a worker you are. And that's what I look for. And what happens, though, is it just so happens that I have a very diverse team. I'm looking for someone that is willing to get out of their car and willing to go out and meet people. Sometimes people they're not naturally able to speak to people. And you have to have that person who's able to go up and strike a conversation with a wall, because they're not always going to be receptive to you when you walk up to them. You have to have the people that are willing to talk and willing to communicate. That's why one of the things I keep kind of pushing is training. We do a lot of good training on de-escalation, verbal judo, verbal defense, and tactics. We need to have a lot of good training as far as being able to speak to people and know people. I would love to have a bigger pool. I think I have 25% to choose from for it to be diverse, but that's department wide. I don't know the statistics here at West Precinct that I get to choose from. So when I choose a team, diversity is number 1. Number 2, though, then is they have to be able to talk to people, because all it takes is that one person that maybe they respond to the Dream Center, and unfortunately TJ may have a bad experience there at the Dream Center, and I can't afford that. We can't ever let these relationships be broken. So you have to be very intentional who you put on these teams, and you got to be intentional about the people you put over these teams, to be their supervisors. It's very important.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any more questions for the sergeant? John?
So I'd like to just say thank you, first of all, for being part of this, and thank you, TJ. Your perspective, it's so valuable to hear your perspective. I'm sorry we didn't connect with Ms. Cox, but I hope that you will give her your regards. I appreciate the time all of you are spending on this, but I do want to also say to you, Larry, the work that you're doing is, it falls exactly into this category. I will never, and I want to talk a little bit about that. I'll never forget 25 years ago spending time with youth outreach workers in Roxbury and Dorchester and Boston, and seeing the work that you all do. I think we started off talking about collective efficacy, and that's a very buzzy word these days, but it's really important. And what I think about that is a neighborhood's ability to address issues on its own, its capacity to be a healthy, successful neighborhood. And the presence of Gideon's Army is directly boosts the collective efficacy of the areas where it works. So that's hugely important. And just when I put on my policy wonk hat and think about what is, we want to be community informed and evidence based as we think about these things. And whenever I think about interventions, I think, focus is important, balance is important, can't just be law enforcement responding, and fairness is really important. And when you look at the crime stats that Sergeant Bacanta talked about, they're really striking. Citywide, we're looking at a significant increase in gun violence right now. And when you look at effective responses to that, which obviously relates to this, problem solving is important, but there are a couple of interventions that really seem to work. One is the cure violence model of violence interruption, which is what Gideon's Army is doing. That works. We need to support that. Group violence interventions of the sort that Stockton, Oakland, and 24 other cities seem to be doing seems to work. Cognitive behavioral therapy seems to work. Those are really strong approaches. And, I think that as we think about, how policing should work and should it reorient to focus on problem solving, I think that's very promising. But we also need a strategy that really addresses collective efficacy, that helps give neighborhoods more tools to address problems. And, we do have a gun violence problem, and we need to be mindful of interventions that work. And, cure violence is one of those, Larry, and I just want you to know that we in the mayor's office are very aware of that. And I also look forward to the chance to talk with you about how that's going and how we can better support you. And, we all appreciate that and know how important it is.
Yes, sir. And thank you. Appreciate you.
Please.
Yes.
Sergeant, if you all have not seen those 2 videos, please watch them. Listening to the sergeant say the words he's saying and describing the situation is one thing, but hearing those residents talk about what they've experienced is amazing. The one word that wasn't used when TJ was talking or when the sergeant was talking was sitting on my front porch. That's one thing several of them said that they had never been able to do before, was sit on their front porch. And now they can sit on their front porch. And that, to me, brought it all home. Not only talking about being able to bring her 5-year-old granddaughter to her home, but she had never been able to sit on her own front porch. So please watch those videos. They're very moving.
I also wanted to speak some of the questions that the committee raised in their last meeting. You should all have, in addition, in your inbox when you're done with this, minutes from the last meeting. Sharon, you had asked questions, very appropriate questions, about better understanding what the department means by community policing. There's a long list of programs, but how much energy, people, time, results are coming from these programs? I want you to know that I reached out to Chief Drake about that yesterday and said that this is going to be a major focus from this committee and that we'd like his guidance on understanding, who's doing what in this area. And he's working on that, and he's thinking about who can best address that and answer those questions. So that is very much on our radar screen. Dia, Eric, and I will be following up tomorrow with Judge Blackburn and Ms. Roberson. And our agenda, of course, we're at their disposal, but my hope is that we can look ahead and schedule, in advance, a couple of weeks out, the subject matter experts that you all want to hear from. I appreciate everyone's patience as we sort of pull these things together, sometimes at the last moment, but we're going to get a little further ahead of the curve and make sure that our subject matter experts reflect your priorities. And I think the data committee is going to be really helpful too. I'm looking forward to having, a rep from COB and from MMPD together, working on and getting answers to specific questions that you all have. Always good to have the same facts when you're looking into things.
Would it be okay if we took a minute to hear from Larry about the violence interruptive model? Because I think one of the things that I'm thinking about, maybe I'm on my own on this one, but we heard a model about community policing and a partnership with West Nashville Dream Center, but I know violence interruption as a model may look differently. And at our last meeting, several people shared about a partnership between police and the community, but I think Larry's emphasis was empowering and building the community itself, so that way the community owns things. Would that be okay if we heard for a few minutes from Larry? Is that okay?
Of course.
Larry, can you do that?
Yes, definitely. Yes, well, with our violence interruption, what we do is we canvass the 3728 zip code, and we go into the community speaking with residences and finding out what their needs are. And when we find out what their needs are, we start on a barbecue, and from a barbecue, we set up safe zones where children can play without worrying about, people shooting or and walk around. And when most people in these residences see us, they respect us. So, they fall back on whatever they're doing. And, the elderly, they can sit on their porches. They can do all that. And, we was at McKissick this past school year. And when students got out from school, we went down there to, I think it's Save a Lot. It's some store down there. When the kids was leaving the store, they was having issues with the people that owned the store, because they said they was going in there stealing. So we hung out down there with the children and made sure that they were respectful when they went in. They went in, two at a time. And the owner of the store or the management of the store, he saw the improvement in them by us just being down there, to where he's kind of relaxed on letting more of them come in at a time. So it's just all about going into these communities and getting with the ones who are unapproachable. Because in most cases, we use credible messengers. Like myself, like I said, I was sentenced to life in prison. I did 20 years in prison. So most people, they respect me just on the strength of my past. However, a lot of them love me for what I'm doing now in the present. And that's what allows them to lend me their ear, because they see just the changes that I done made. And it gives them hope and inspiration just by seeing what I'm doing, as well as the other members of our team. Because, of us, you know, law enforcement definitely wouldn't hire us to go on and have an impact in that form in that form right there. However, you know, Rashida gave us opportunity by giving us you know, pay or a salary to go in and curb this violence that's taking place, which we did a good job in North Nashville, because the crime rate went down like 6 or 9% by us being in North Nashville. And I ain't mistaken, I think that's the only precinct or the only area where the crime rate went down. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not, and you know, it's just all about having credible messages. That's why I said, like, that drug dealer that's out there, or that guy that's out there with that pistol, you know, maybe he got influence in the community. So maybe you can go to him and get him, you know, pay him to watch over what's going on, to where he make an influence them by his change. You know, you got to go in and you got to go get the ones who got the influence. Instead of locking them up, maybe you can clean them up and give them an opportunity to inspire and see that just by him changing his life, they might want to change their life. But if you just throw them away and then they come back, they're going to come back worse, you know, and then they're going to, 9 times out of 10, they're going to come back to those same communities and carry on the same destruction that they was doing when they left. So, you know, that's why we believe in repairing the individual, and then not only repairing them, empowering them. You know, because we can't give up on them, because, you know, they are the fathers or they are the mothers of these children that's going to school and dealing with a whole lot of trauma. The instance like was TJ, what the sister, you know what I'm saying, she spoke on with the children walking to the place with soiled diapers and things of that nature. It's like, okay, the parents, what options did they have? Because that's a high poverty going on over there. They probably had to go to work. They probably didn't know that their child was going to allow somebody to come into the house when they was gone, or you know, they ain't knowing what's going on because they got to, you know, keep a roof over their head or keep the lights on. You know, it's just a whole lot of things, but it still just go back to one thing, and that's concentrated poverty. When you got concentrated poverty, you're gonna have high crime, and that's just the bottom line.
Can I speak into that?
Yeah.
So, Larry, I can't speak to hiring you, but man, that's exactly what we want to work with on the police department. And I think that falls into what Mr. Fisher was saying, is y'all's group plus what my team does, things like that. It helps more than just our community. It's going to help all of Nashville, us working together. So, man, I'd love to touch base with you sometime after this, because those are McKissick's right next to our neighborhood, and we had heard about y'all going over there to help out at that Save a Lot. So empowerment's a huge word to use, because that's also our goal. I know that's the Dream Center's goal. You know, we don't want to just, what do they say? Give someone a fish and they can eat, but teach them to fish and they can eat a long time. And you don't want to just help them with one issue and then just leave them alone, right? And make them keep relying on you. You want to empower that community to take over that community. And to give you an example that actually happened today, I went over to talk to some residents, and I was just asking how everyone was doing, making sure they haven't been having any issues. And somebody said, well, of course there's no issues. The police are right there. And they were looking at Miss Cheryl. So, you know, they know that she's not going to allow anything to happen anymore. And you go, like Larry said, you go to those people of influence, because they're the ones that can really help change that community. So, Larry, you were right on the money with that. And I hope, you know, Gideon's Army and the police department truly can work together, because I think, you know, all of our groups and the Dream Center and other churches, if we can work together collectively, we can really make a huge difference, better than just one community at a time.
I commend you all for what you're doing over there. You're doing a great job.
Thank you.
Yes.
It sounds like maybe a barbecue is a better idea than coffee and donuts, though. That may be a good call.
Sergeant, if I could ask you, first, thank you for your presentation, you and TJ, and for your work. And I watched the videos, and they're very inspiring and and hearing from you all directly even more inspiring. And my thoughts immediately go to replicating what you're doing in other places and how to make that successful. So a couple of things on that. One is, do you think this is something that you can train officers to do? It strikes me that, like, listening to you talk, I would want to eat donuts with you. I think I'd want to eat donuts with the people who are on your team. But, you know, I work in an office where some people are good at their jobs, but you really don't want to talk to them very much. And the same has got to be true for police officers. So one thing is, how would you, if you were to scale this up, how do you get the right people to do it is one thing. And then the second question is something that both you and TJ touched on, which is, you know, there is some risk in the community to affiliating yourself with the police. I'm making an assumption, not from my own experience, but that if this is a high crime neighborhood and you're seen having donuts with the police, you're taking a risk. To the same extent, if you're an officer and you don't have this relationship yet, and you sit in the alley with the donuts, I imagine that there are not a lot of officers. There's some officers who are not going to feel comfortable in that setting. So if you could address those two things, I think it would help figure out, like, how does this model replicate if that's what we want to do.
Yeah, let me address that part about eating the donuts with us, and then I'll talk about the scale up. We had that issue when we first started over in our neighborhood. Our residents that did start to talk with us and interacted with us and hung out with us, they were called out by others in the neighborhood, you know, and they were not well received. And even to the point where one gentleman threw a shotgun over his shoulders and just walked over to our residents and said, "You ain't talking to them anymore, are you?" Well, here comes that problem solving partnership. Who did they tell about it? And we went and found him specifically, and then we encouraged them, we empowered them to say, "Look, we need you to prosecute on this, because if you can prosecute on this, we can get that person that threatened y'all with that shotgun removed from the community. Here's collective advocacy for you, though." It doesn't stop there. Then you get on the horn with the DA's office and you say, "Listen, DA, we need you to help us out, empower this community. Don't just give this man probation, because he will be right back to that neighborhood and he's going to go right back after them. We need you to give him that 30 days. We need you to really try to keep him out of that community," because what it does is it gives that community time to heal and empower itself and feel encouraged to then, when that man comes back, go, "Don't mess with us or we're going to call him again and you'll spend another 30 days. So it's about all of us working together to empower them to be willing to have that relationship with us. Because now they're not afraid to, everybody has a relationship with us at 40th and Clifton. A lot of them do. It also comes from people like the Dream Center who give you that street cred to say they know everybody in that neighborhood and they say, "Look, these police are good." They give you that credible, you can talk to them. They're not gonna damage anything. I also want to sorry, I'm getting my thoughts together. I got a text message. So let's talk about the scale up. The reason people want to do this job is when they hear about it. I hope some of you have been encouraged by what you've heard. As you can see, I'm very passionate about it. Sometimes it's harder for me to get all my words together because I get so excited and I think about all I want to tell you guys. People, this type of work can be contagious. And I like to tell our executive staff when I do get a chance to talk to them is, you want to talk about morale. When you see officers do this kind of job, you see officers that want to do this. We used to have ComStat station-wise, and Commander Corman wanted to expose people to this type of work often. And so he would bring in the new recruits that were in training, and he'd want them to sit in ComStat and hear about what our team does. Every single time that new recruit heard about what we did, he'd stop me after the meeting, or she, and say, "Hey, that's what I want to do. How can I get involved with that?" So I think the more people see and hear what we do, they're going to be into it. Yeah, there are those officers, as TJ mentioned, that they don't agree with what we do. They call us social workers, or, you know, the ice cream men of the department, because we might hand out ice cream to kids. But, you know, that doesn't matter. You know, we're going to keep doing what we're going to do. And I think eventually, you know, more and more people that hear about what we do are going to see how effective it is. Because once you start telling those people, how effective it is on a crime standpoint, then they start changing their mind and say, wow, that is actually really good. We had someone here, a lieutenant at West Precinct, who was not a fan of what we did. And after about a year of watching what we've done in that community, and he looked at crime statistics, and there was no more violent crime. And violent crime, there'd been no shootings, there'd been no murders in 2 years here in this neighborhood, and that's unheard of. He came up to me in the garage and apologized for ever not believing in what we did. So the more we get the word out, that's why I was saying earlier, I want that platform to get the word out of what we do. You're going to find more people and more officers that are willing to do it. Yeah, there are a few people you might want to hang out with, and those might be the ones that aren't good to talk to and wouldn't be good on the community engagement, but doesn't mean they're not good somewhere else on the department. So you're going to have specific officers that are very well at this, and I think they will seek out positions like this as it starts to scale up. One of the things I really push when I go to precincts that are starting to implement teams and help them get started is I tell them you cannot just put people on the team, as we talked about with Mr. Foster earlier. You have to hand select these people. And as this starts to scale up department wide, as it already is with Chief Drake, you're going to have more and more people come out to say, look, I want to be involved with that. As far as scaling up, for me, I think it would speak volumes if, and I'm speaking for me, I'm not speaking for the police department here. If you had a whole division that was community engagement related division to say, look, this is what we are committing to. And what it does is you make sure every engagement team's successful, right? We're all on the same page. Everyone's doing the exact same thing. Your commander, your captain that's over you is having that same influence that like Commander Corman has had for us over here to help us be successful. Your supervisors, your sergeants are all on the same page of how important it is, and you're getting ideas off of each other of what you should do, and you're taking it back to your communities. And I think that'd be a huge way for this to be even more successful on a scaled up point of view, because I'm not afraid. I know it can still be successful at the precinct level because it's been successful, but there's just so many hands involved, or other people have all their different ideas. And if you do it at a bigger scale, a single division, I think you're gonna see everyone doing the same thing, and everything's gonna be lined up. And I just think it's gonna speak volumes to the community to say, hey, this is our focus, and we're really committed to that community engagement.
Bob, that would be a way to get all your nonprofits involved in one location.
I was just going to say too, from a community partner perspective, if you don't have the right team, I can't speak for Gideon's Army, but I would venture to say it would be the same. Community partners are not going to invite you into those relationships. And so, and I think Jason would agree that this model works because of the partnership between the community and the partners that are already working in those communities. And like, I know that even, with North Nashville, as they're ramping up their team, I just spent 2.5 hours with them just talking through what it would look like and how we would partner and the things that would happen. And there was something that we had to discuss about how some of their officers had responded to a call. And it was really eye-opening for us to recognize that, like, we were taking a huge risk by agreeing to begin to work with this team, because we don't know them like we know the West team. And that was when I first realized, I really had kind of an eye-opening moment, realizing that the West team, there's such a level of respect on both sides that even if we call when they're not there, they'll find out what they can do, or find out who's on, to make sure that nothing escalates in a way that would damage a relationship. And we definitely don't have that yet with North. And that I realized how long it took with West. But I guess it just seemed gradual. But starting a brand new relationship made me realize how hard that is. And I just don't think, even if there was one team member that we felt like we couldn't trust on the team, I don't think we would have that same type of relationship that we do with West.
And I would interject too here that, and I always get way ahead of myself, but when we're done here with we're just getting started in our learning, I certainly am. But at the end of the day, what we want is a leader who creates a culture of community policing. I mean, that's why I wanted to be on this subcommittee, because I believe so much in the approach that we've heard today, and I believe so much in all the goodwill that exists out there in so many organizations. And I really believe that there can be a broad partnership. So you don't have to go, TJ, so you can trust lots of people, not just some people. And I think that's what, when it comes time for us to have our input into saying, here's a job description, or here's the kind of person, it's going to be somebody, in my book, who embraces, really embraces this idea for the whole county.
John?
And I want to say thank you to everyone. I'm going to drop off momentarily because I've got another committee that is starting up in 3 minutes.
I'm with you too. It's 3 minutes to 6, and I'm going to have to drop off too.
Could I ask them maybe a quick technical question, because, and it may be maybe the wrong question, but Sergeant, I'm getting used to sort of police structure and procedures, and what's the relationship between community affairs units and what you are doing?
So, in a real quick nutshell, since y'all have to leave, community affairs, community COCOs, they cover the entire precinct, right? The COCO will cover the entire precinct, all of your neighborhood watches, all your churches in that entire precinct. I think West has like 170 something neighborhood watch programs, whereas community engagement is condensed down to one little neighborhood. So we're able to really focus. That's why it's a very manpower intensive program. That's that investment I was talking about that your executive staff has to make and has made into seeing this be successful. So one sergeant covering an entire precinct at a community affairs level, whereas you have an entire team doing the engagement in an actual community. The difference, though, COCOs, they're providing police access from people who are already engaged with police. They like the police. They're reaching out to say, hey, can you help us with this, or come to this meeting, come to that meeting. Engagement, we're going to those high crime areas that don't have a good relationship. They're not showing up to the community meetings, and we're reaching out to them to build that relationship with them.
Great, thanks.
Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next Thursday at 5 o'clock. But watch your inboxes between now and then. I'm sure there'll be lots of things flying around. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.